it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen.
The Last Radio Call by Positive Tennis 6626. Chapter 1. Normal Day. 55 to dispatch. Show me 10-8 from that call. Put me on Highway 35 near mile marker 157 for radar, I said into my patrol car's radio.
10-4, 55. Have you cleared from the call and out at 35 for radar?
The dispatcher replied in an always calm demeanor. I sat in the median running radar, with the speed locked to 10 over the posted limit. The constant low warble of the radar unit was just background noise to me at this point. I just opened up CAD, that's computer-aided dispatch, or as the general public like to call it, the laptop in the cop car. I just opened up the program to start my report, and my cell phone started to ring. The screen said, Erica. I answered. Hey babe, how you doing? That's good, I'm fine. I looked over at the clock. 16:21 hours, and my shift ended at 1700 hours. I have just over half an hour left pending any last-minute calls that come in. I love you two. Have fun on your girls' trip. Let me know when you get there. I'll miss you too, but don't worry, I'll be fine. I'm gonna see if I can pick up an extra shift this weekend. I gotta help pay for our wedding. It's only 3 months away. Okay, yeah, I've gotta finish up some paperwork. Love you too. Bye. I put the phone back in my pocket and started my report. On, date redacted, at approximately 16:10, I, Reserve Deputy Alex, badge number 55, got dispatched via radio to, address redacted, in District 2 for a report for a battery in process. When I arrived on the scene, Deputies Kirby, badge number 26, and Welch, badge number 9, had already arrived and had the suspect in custody and were waiting for a transport to the jail. I spoke to the victim, name redacted, who I later identified by his state driver's license. He informed me that he was just out for a jog when someone attacked him and bit him on the arm twice and leg once. The victim was able to get away and call 911. Sunburst Fire Department arrived to take him to Mercy Medical Hospital for treatment. See Form 5910-79 for full report. I just clicked on the report form after finishing my synopsis report when a call came over the radio. 5280, 5290, respond to 618 Chatterton. 618 Chatterton for a group of 5 fighting. Well, I laughed and thought, have fun with that, Sunburst PD. I always like to keep the radio in my squad car set to scan to listen for SBPD frequencies. I work for District 2 in the county of Bear Creek. The biggest city in my area is Sunburst, with a population of 91,170 and employs 153 police officers. There are other smaller towns in my district with no more than a few thousand people at most. Sunburst is surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and the Cook River a mile long on the 4th side. The main way in and out was over the Cook Bridge, or the Big C as we called it. That's why I normally write reports on Highway 35. If anyone was going to run from SBPD, this was the only way out of the city. I've gotten a car with my spike strip on more than one occasion. My radar went from a low warble to a high-pitched ping. I looked up on the display screen, 90 miles an hour. I let out a soft "fuck" under my breath. I looked in the rearview mirror to see a Toyota Corolla flying up on me. I closed my laptop and put my squad in drive. With my foot on the brake and hand over the light bar control, I really didn't want to stop any car this close to the end of watch, but 90 in a 65 is something I can't just overlook. Toyota blew past me. I activated my emergency light, checked to make sure it was safe to pull out into the traffic, and floored it. The growl of the Crown Vic's V8 rumbled to life as I took off down the highway in pursuit of the speeder. As I sped away, I could hear my radio. Dispatch, this is 5290. Myself and 5280, 5 individuals at gunpoint. Send backup. The dispatcher replied with,
10-4, 5270, 5260, 5250. Respond. 1033 to 618 Chatterton. 618 Chatterton to back out 5280 and 90. All other officers stay off the air until I hear back from 5280.
I just caught up with a speeding vehicle and pulled it over. Our dispatcher for the county is different than the city, so I was able to radio my information to dispatch. 55 to dispatch, I said.
Go ahead, 55,
replied the dispatcher. Dispatch, can you run a 28 on a Toyota Corolla? License plate Boy Victor Adam 279 BVA 279. Silver in color, occupied ×3. A few moments later, dispatch came back with
10-4. Vehicle's clean.
which means it's not stolen. The tags are current, and the owner of the vehicle is not wanted in connection with a crime. I walked up to the vehicle and pressed my thumb onto the taillight, so if anything were to happen to me, they could dust the car for prints and find I was there. I walked up to the driver door, but stopped short just behind the A-pillar of the car. You never want to get right up in front of the window. That makes it way too easy to be killed. The driver rolled down his window, and I did my introduction. Hi, I'm Deputy Alex with the Bear Creek County Sheriff Department. The reason for my traffic stop is that you were going 90 in a posted 65. Any reason why you were speeding today? Also, can I see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance? I always like to have the driver talk to me and look for stuff at the same time. If they're drunk or nervous, they typically can't do both at the same time. The driver said to me, "Hey man, sorry, I didn't realize I was going that fast." There were two girls in the back seat of the car, maybe no older than 12 or 14. The blonde girl spoke up. "Yes, you did, Daddy. You said if we don't get up to the cabin before sundown, Mommy was going to tear you a new one." Well, I was trying to keep the grin off my face at this. The driver said to me, "Here's my driver's license, sir." I took his license and asked, "Mr. name redacted, is this your current address?" "Yeah, let me just give you my insurance card." The blonde girl started talking to me. "Hi, officer. How are you?" I kept one eye on her dad to make sure he wasn't reaching for something he shouldn't be. I turned to her and replied, "Not too bad. How are you? How's school going?" "It's good. This is my friend Jessica, but she's sleeping right now." The girl next to her had jet black hair covering her face. Her head was wedged in between the door and the headrest, which is the most comfortable position one can get in a car. "You staying out of trouble?" I said in a joking manner. "I'm trying to, but my dad says if I develop early like my mom, it'll be hard for me to stay out of trouble." I coughed, trying to hold back a laugh. I glanced at the dad, who was red in the face from embarrassment. "Officer, I found my insurance card." I took it from him and walked back to my patrol car. 550 to dispatch. Can you run a 27 for me?
10-4. 55, go ahead with your 27.
Dispatch responded. I was just about to read off the name on the driver's license when the emergency tone on my radio went off. I looked down at the small digital display on my patrol car's radio reading Channel 4 SBPD. It was flashing red. Someone must have hit the emergency button on their police radio. When pressed, it gives the officer who pressed the button 30 seconds of open mic time to say whatever they need to say with no interruption. What I heard next is something no officer ever wants to hear.
"Officer down. Officer down. Shots fired. 5280 is down. We got a mob coming after us. 2 additional people have been shot. I'm dragging 5280 down Chatterton Street. I need backup now."
There were some noises coming through the radio. It sounded like dragging on pavement and then yelling.
"Stay back."
2 pistol shots rang out over the radio. Then there was silence for exactly 1 heartbeat. Dispatch came on with a calm voice, but it was traced with a hint of panic.
Tackle alert. Tackle alert. Tackle alert. Officers need immediate assistance. 618 Chatterton. 618 Chatterton. Officers down. Shots fired. This is an all units respond. 1033 TAC alert. Unknown conditions of the officer. Unknown number of assailants. 618 Chatterton. TAC alert. TAC alert. TAC alert.
I jumped out the door of my cruiser and ran up to the car. Okay, it's your lucky day, buddy. Here's your information. Threw it all in the front seat of his car. I have to go. Now, slow it down and drive safely. Jessica, the girl in the back, was awake now. Our eyes locked for only a few seconds. She had the prettiest emerald green eyes I think I've ever seen. I knew I'd never forget them. I stumbled for a second. "Hi, officer," she said. Well, that traffic stop will be the last normal thing that would ever happen to me. Jumped back into my police car, slammed it into drive, and pushed the gas pedal to the floorboard. This was an officer down, a brother in blue, and I was going to go balls to the wall to get there. I grabbed my radio and called dispatch. 55 to dispatch. Clear me for that traffic stop. Show me 1017 en route to that TAC alert at 618 Chatterton. I'm going off frequency. We'll be on mutual aid 1 if you need me. Before I got a response back from dispatch, I changed to mutual aid 1 on my police radio. I did all this while driving at 120 miles an hour. Took the closest off-ramp, crossed over the highway and got back on the highway, this time driving towards the city of Sunburst. In my rearview mirror, I saw the lights of another police vehicle. I slowed down so we could travel together. The police SUV was a state police vehicle. I quickly switched to the state police frequency and pressed the push-to-talk button on the radio. "State Police, on 35. This is Deputy Alex from BCSD. Are you responding to the TAC alert?"
10-4.
"Do I need to take the lead?" asked the trooper. If you could. I'm not familiar enough with the area."
10-4. Taking the lead now,
replied the trooper. The trooper honked his air horn twice and passed me on the left.
10-4. FYI, we're on mutual aid 1 frequency,
I said before switching back over. 2 more squad cars fell in line behind us. One was a City of Bellevue police squad, which is a small city a few miles away from Sunburst. The other was a Bear Creek County deputy. Our convoy of 4 squad cars surged ahead with the emergency lights flashing and sirens wailing. We drove at approximately 100 to 120 miles an hour for about 5 minutes when a voice came over mutual aid 1.
"This is Captain Kent, Sunburst PD. I'm the incident commander for this TAC alert. All SBPD officers form up in your civil control team leaders. BCSD deputies, state police, and other responding agencies are staging 6 blocks west of Chatterton, forming up and heading downtown."
Once on scene, we were directed to a side street to park our squad cars. I was confused on why we were staging 6 blocks away from the original call. Also, why were we supposed to head downtown in the opposite direction? I found a group of 6 deputies from my department and 1 lieutenant standing around talking. I walked up and asked,
"Hey, what's going on?"
Lieutenant O'Connor turned around to answer.
"Well, nice of you to join us.
I was just about to tell everyone." He looked at me and said, "You're a reserve deputy, aren't you?" I pointed to my shoulder patch. Underneath the shirt department logo was a small tab that said, "Reserve" on it.
"Yes, sir, but I'm looking to be a good fit for full-time when there's an opening in the department."
Lieutenant O'Connor waved the answer away and asked, "Have you ever done any riot control?"
"I was trained and certified in crowd control, including pepperball and beanbags usage, sir."
"Good. Now, listen up, everyone," Lieutenant O'Connor said. "The mob that attacked the 2 officers have turned into a riot and have moved to the downtown area, where they've been attacking anyone and damaging property. Their numbers have swollen up to 500 or so. The mayor said that this is an unlawful assembly, and rumors have it the governor has declared a state emergency and is calling in the National Guard."
"Why are they doing this?"
the young female deputy asked. Lieutenant O'Connor replied, "Well, there are 3 facts about riots. 1, crowds are anonymous. 2, anonymity breeds violence. 3, violence lowers consequences. You need a catalyst to set off the violence. I'm guessing the 2 officers shot someone who was well liked in the community." "Do we know the status of the 2 officers?" asked the same female deputy. "Last I heard, their backup showed up and pulled both of them out of there. They were in real tough condition, lots of bad cuts. People even bit them. They were transported to Mercy Medical Hospital for treatment," answered the lieutenant. There were a few murmurs from the deputies. One even did the sign of the cross over his chest. "Now, let's get down to brass tacks and discuss our role in restoring peace," Lieutenant O'Connor announced. The front and second echelon of officers will be made up of SBPD and some of the smaller townships. SBPD has 6 of their CRT or Crisis Response Team, aka SWAT, with us. Their captain will be the team leader for the riot team. 3 of the CRT officers will be the gas officers in charge of using smoke and gas grenades. If needed, the last 2 will provide deadly force overwatch on top of the Bearcat. If one of the protesters gets ready to throw a Molotov cocktail or pull a firearm, these guys will be ready to shoot. State police, along with our K9 and SBPD K9, will be on the arrest team. The sheriff department, that's us, will be rear guard and transport. We have 2 of our paddy wagons here that will be used for transport. Our job is to make sure no one slips in behind the group and tries to attack us from the rear. We'll also swap out with the arrest team if needed. Now everyone, don your riot gear. If you have less lethals with you, like the large cans of pepper spray or pepper ball guns, break them out now. Meet back here in 10 minutes. I'm going to check in with the incident commander and let him know the number of deputies I have. I walked back to my squad car, a little confused on how a riot could form so quickly. Emergency vehicles with their sirens blaring could be heard racing around the city in all different directions, no doubt answering 911 calls and doing their best to keep the city from falling apart. The CRT Bearcat armored car rolled past me as I got to my car. The throaty rumble of its diesel engine passed me. Its weight shook the ground, giving me a surge of confidence that we could restore order. I got into my riot gear as quickly as I could. Think of a suit of armor made of hard plastic plating with thick foam padding underneath, and then covered by Nomex, which is a very flame-resistant material. I clipped my drop-leg gas mask pouch on my left side. I then holstered my Monadnock Hardwood 2800. Now, that might sound fancy, but it's just a wooden riot baton. I had to do some digging around the truck of my squad, but found the hard plastic case and flipped it open. Inside, protected by foam, was a Tipman 98 custom paintball gun in bright yellow. I assembled the gun and loaded it with pepper ball rounds. Unlike normal paintball rounds, they were filled with pepper spray instead of paint. When the round hits someone or something, it breaks apart and sends pepper spray in a powder form everywhere. I put on my belt with 4 reloads of the pepper ball gun. Each reload holds 200 rounds of pepper ball. I checked to make sure the CO2 tank was screwed into the pistol grip of the gun and working properly. After ensuring that it was all in correct working order, the other deputies and I returned to the staging area. SBPD took over a parking ramp for the staging area rally point. Their mobile command and control unit was a heavily modified RV complete with antennae, satellite dishes, and cameras protruding from all areas, along with a flushable toilet trailer and a large tractor trailer with an OWI, arrest processing center. I asked one of the local cops why there was a processing center. He told me it was for processing large numbers of people without overloading the jails. They can fingerprint, photograph, run names to search for warrants, and either give a citation, cut them loose, or load them directly onto the prison bus to be taken to the local jail. There were several ambulances staged here as well, to treat both protesters and officers. As we began to move out, one of the EMTs, holding a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup, gave the passing officers a 2-finger salute and said, "Good luck out there." Chapter 2. Chaos in the Streets. We marched a few blocks north, and I do mean march. The sound of all the boots hitting pavement at once has a psychological effect to any rioters. The team leader, a captain from SBPD, ordered a company of officers, just a hair over 90 police officers from all over the area, to a halt. First echelon of officers formed a line and donned their gas masks. Behind them, the second echelon did the same. Being that I was in the rear of the group, 2 blocks from the front line, I was lucky enough not to have to put on my gas mask right away. I only needed to put it on if things really kicked off. As I was facing away, I sneaked a peek over my shoulder. I could see thousands of people in the streets, just 6 or 7 blocks away, but stretching as far as I could see. Every now and then, the sound of a window breaking, punctuated by the occasional scream, could be heard. The smell of burning electronics was wafting in the air, and a thin layer of haze was beginning to form. Buildings that were dozens of stories tall lined each side of the street. The captain announced, "Okay, everyone, listen up. We need to disrupt the crowd into lesser, more manageable groups of people. They're causing damage to the city and have been declared an unlawful assembly. We're not here to deny anyone their First Amendment right to free speech. We do need to curb the violence in the city. What exactly they're upset about, it's hard to say, but this ends now. Remember your training and help the man or woman next to you. We'll push up 1 block at a time and clear each intersection, then move forward. We want to disperse and discourage the crowd from any violent actions. Arrest only when necessary, and only the people who are instigating. If they run, let them run. Don't break ranks to chase them down. We're going to move up 2 blocks and then stop. Right, let's move out." We moved up 2 blocks and stopped. The captain started speaking to the crowd on his megaphone. "This is the Sunburst Police Department. This has been declared an unlawful assembly. You must disperse immediately. Use of smoke, tear gas, and pain compliance munitions have been authorized. You may be arrested." The captain repeated these messages a few more times. The female deputy next to me leaned over and said to me, "You know what's weird? I don't hear any chanting or people making demands. All I hear are moans." I listened closely. She was right. There was no chanting that people normally associate with protests, just a low, Then the command came to move up another block. I heard, "We're only 2 blocks away. On 3 rounds of smoke between us and them. Fire when ready." The fast boom, boom, boom from the officers firing their Milcor 6-shot 40mm launcher could be heard. Within seconds, smoke filled the streets and blocked the view of any protesters that I could see. Lieutenant O'Connor yelled at me, "Alex, eyes front. Watch your sector." I could hear chanting coming from the street in front of me and coming out from one of the side aisles. I don't remember what they were protesting, and honestly, it doesn't really matter. About a dozen of them were walking up on us. A few were holding makeshift weapons, and the man out front with a megaphone was making a list of dumb demands to the police. Lieutenant O'Connor walked up to me and said, "Alex, fire on the man with the megaphone. He is the voice of the group. Stopping him or driving him back will discourage the rest." I raised my pepper ball gun and pointed at the man who was still a block away from me and yelled, "Turn around and leave or you'll be fired upon." Well, just kept coming at me. Mind does weird things in high-stress situations. I wasn't having any moral or ethical dilemmas about what I was about to do, though. I thought, hey, I used to be on a semi-pro paintball team. I wonder if I still have the skills. I mean, it's been a few years, but it's like riding a bike, right? Yeah, probably. I fired quick 6 shots, 4 of them hitting the man's megaphone, and the other 2 going wide to the right. Yep, I still got it. The man looked confused as to why his device stopped working. I fired at his face, and the pepper ball broke and sent the powder into the air. Lieutenant O'Connor came over and gave me a hard thwap on the helmet. "Alex, you don't aim at the face. You aim at the feet or the chest. Do you know the liability you just put yourself in?" Then he leaned in and whispered, "But off the record, that's a hell of a shot. God, I hate the people with the megaphones." The rest of the protesters formed phalanxes around the group's leader with umbrellas, shielding him from any more pepper balls. The female deputy next to me stepped forward with her 12-gauge beanbag shotgun and shouted, "Beanbag!" This signaled to everyone around her that the gunshot they were about to hear was coming from here and not anyone other than law enforcement. She fired, and the beanbag round punched right through the umbrellas, causing the small group to retreat around the block. This all went on for a short time. The group would approach us, and we'd fire at them, and they'd retreat. Lieutenant O'Connor came up at some point and said, "Mask for gas, mask for gas." Half of us put on our gas masks while the other half guarded them, and vice versa. I've been so focused on protecting the back of the riot team that I never took the time to look to see what was happening in front of the formation. No sooner had I put my mask on and checked for a good seal than I heard a dozen quick of the launchers, no doubt launching tear gas into the rioters in front of us. Then two more thumps as two canisters arched over our heads and towards the small group of protesters. Lieutenant O'Connor said to all of us, "Ask the captain to fire off 2 rounds of tear gas at that group, since they've been harassing us this whole time. Well, that shit should run them off." The tear gas filled the street, and we were unable to see the protesters. A few minutes went by. I could hear the frontline officers shouting, "Move back!" and hitting their wooden batons against their riot shields. The tear gas cleared up enough for us to see the group running away. As they hightailed it for the hills, a figure appeared from the side alley between 2 buildings. Shuffling towards us, his head resting on his right shoulder like his neck couldn't support his weight. His clothing was old and torn, and what I was hoping was motor oil clung to his shirt. His arms were outstretched and his hands were opening and closing in an almost automatic fashion. I raised my pepperball gun and fired 6 quick rounds at the guy's feet. The pepper powder wafted into the air. The man didn't seem to be affected. I raised it higher and fired another burst into the man's chest. Still, he didn't care. I fired about 2 dozen pepper balls, hitting him all over. I even saw the powder fly right into his face. I remember reading that 1% of the world's population is immune to pepper spray. The only time I've seen someone shrug off hits like that is when they're high on crystal meth. This guy moved too slow for a meth head. I looked over at the female deputy and could see the look of worry on her face, which I'm sure was reflected on my own face. She fired the beanbag shotgun, hitting the man in the shoulder. He spun around and landed on the ground hard, not once trying to break his fall. I heard his teeth break as they hit the roadway.
"Rest team, move in,"
was shouted from someone behind me, and 2 big guys went out to secure the guy we just beanbagged. They got him in flex cuffs, which are basically very big zip ties, when a second man scrambled out from the other side, close to the arrest team. He fell on top of one of the arresting officers. I dropped my pepperball gun and let it dangle by its sling in front of me. I ran towards them with all the speed and power of a big rig flying down the highway and slammed my hard plastic shoulder protector into the man's chest, knocking him off the officer and sending both of us tumbling to the ground. Before I could get up, the man I just hit fell upon me and started trying to bite me. He bit down hard onto the plexiglass face protector of my gas mask. His teeth left indents and his mouth was wide open, his tongue licking the outside of the visor. Black, thick saliva dripped onto my mask, blurring out the world around me. The squeaking of his tongue on the plexiglass sent shivers down my spine. My pepperball gun was wedged between us, and I couldn't get any leverage to flip the man off me. That's when I saw the blur of a bright green buttstock of a shotgun make contact with the man's face. Then strong arms were helping to pick me up. Lieutenant O'Connor said. Easy there, Alex. We're going to send you up near the front. The SWAT team's medic will look at you. You should have something to disinfect that mask of yours. Another deputy had to guide me up to the front since my mask was covered in black gunk that nobody wanted to touch. I heard an unfamiliar voice in a Texan accent say, Jesus, that's one way to test if your mask actually works. Sit him down here, I got him. I was guided to sit down at the rear bumper of the armored SWAT truck. The same voice said, Now, don't move. I'm going to spray you down with some disinfectant and try and get that nasty stuff off your mask. After a minute or so, I was, in his words, disinfected. My riot gear felt heavier now, and the SWAT medic informed me I was doused head to toe in disinfectant chemicals. The medic turned to walk back inside the armored SWAT truck and said, Hey, Doc, far be it from me to judge your medical ability, but what is that gray spot on my face shield? The medic came back out with a set of pliers and pulled on the mask until the gray spot was gone. The medic looked at the object between his pliers. Well, would you look at that? It was a human tooth. Damn, that man must have bitten down hard to get it stuck in the visor of your mask like that. Sure enough, it was a tooth. It wasn't a small piece either. It was most of the tooth. I looked at the medic and said, Hey man, do you have some water or something I can have? He nodded and said, Yeah, let me dig some out. We got a case of water inside that SWAT truck. He went back inside the armored SWAT truck then. I stood there and just took a second to let the situational awareness sink in. We heard the sound of smoke and tear gas grenades being fired, and a steady moaning could be heard over the SWAT truck's diesel engine. I leaned around the armored truck just enough to be able to see the other SWAT guys on the arrest team decked out in full battle rattle, beside the Milcor grenade launchers that looked like giant revolvers which held 6 40mm grenades. Each man had a heavily customized rifle slung on his back. No doubt they were fully automatic. Now, I'm a bit of a gun nerd, but the accessories they had looked like some alien technology hanging off their rifles. As they were firing the grenade launchers, the smoke became too thick to see much past the arrest team who headed into the smoke. I lost sight of them for a moment, and the next thing I knew, they were back with someone handcuffed and a bite hood over the offender's head. The bite hood was a thick cloth bag that was solid on the bottom and made of a mesh netting on the top. That way the person who was wearing it could still see where they were going. It prevented the wearer from biting or spitting on the officers. They walked the arrestee past me and put the person in the back of the paddy wagon, yelling, "Right, this one's full." The transport van left and another one took its place. I managed to talk to the two officers as they made their way back to the front before they were obscured by smoke. "Yeah, how's it going up there? I noticed we haven't moved in some time." One of the officers spoke up. "Yes, getting tough up there. We're holding one intersection, but they're coming at us from two sides. The front and the second echelon are almost 100% engaged, and the protesters are trying to push their way through with brute force. Yeah, we're scooping one or two of them up at a time and arresting them. But these fuckers are biting, and we're running low on bite hoods. Hey, do you guys have any in the rear?" I shook my head no. "Oh, we only made 2 arrests so far. We just tossed them in the wagon. I'm just guessing, but I wouldn't know. I was pretty much blind when they brought me up here for a medical." Cries for help could be heard coming from the front. The officer just looked at me and said, "I guess we're needed." Gave me a fist bump. Just then, the SWAT team medic poked his head out the back of the SWAT truck. "Hey man, I have your..." But his words were stopped mid-sentence, as a snip, followed closely by a ping, could be heard. He dropped my water bottle, which was disappointing since the cap was off of it, and it spilled everywhere on the pavement. The medic jumped out of the armored truck and looked up when another snip and ping could be heard. I looked up to where he was looking. I had no idea what that sound was or what was going on that caused the medic to jump out so fast. I saw the 2 SWAT officers on top of the truck who were the deadly force Overwatch. Their rifles had high-end suppressors and scopes, along with bipods extended as the two officers lay belly down out on the roof. I saw it happen. The first officer and then the other squeezed back on their trigger with the rifles tied up against their shoulders. They moved back ever so slightly that I almost missed it. The rifle barely made a sound, but I heard another soft snip. No doubt subsonic ammunition was being used. The only real indication that the rifle was even being fired was the ping from the ejected casing as it clanged on top of the armored roof. The medic said something into his radio, which I couldn't hear because the SWAT team was special and had their own radio frequency that was encrypted. This way no one with a police scanner could listen in. He jumped inside the SWAT truck like a man who'd just been set on fire and came out with a heckler and a Colt MP7. Oh, this was my dream gun. He extended the stock and shouldered the small rifle, pointing it forward towards the direction of the riot team. The shooting from the officers picked up with more urgency now. It was so fast that I couldn't even tell the difference between the two sounds. I heard the first unsuppressed shot ring out from somewhere ahead of us. The two canine dogs started to bark, the hackles on their back raised ready for orders to attack. Then another pistol shot rang out, followed by another. It went deathly quiet for a brief second. I looked over at the SWAT medic. I noticed that the barrel of his weapon was shaking. This rattled my nerves. I know he's just a SWAT medic, but he's still on the SWAT team and does all the same things the rest of the SWAT team does. Granted, he's normally towards the back of the team, but he went through the same training as everyone else. Watching someone like him get nervous is never a good thing. The SWAT officer with the grenade launchers slung them behind their backs and brought their rifles up. And then, it happened. It's like someone had flipped a switch. An almost instantaneous pop of pistols from all over could be heard. Through the smoke, I could see the muzzle flashes of over 36 pistols. It was as if every riot officer on the line got sick and tired of dealing with the rioters and just collectively said, "Screw this. This is much easier anyway," and then just started shooting them. The loud rip of one of the SWAT officers' rifles on full auto added an exclamation point, exclaiming that whatever was going on, all resemblance of law and order had broken down. Two riot officers in full armor, bearing shields and wooden batons, sprinted past. They were covered in the black gunk. Then a group of 3 ran past yelling, "Fall back! The line has collapsed! Fall back to the rally point!" Pistol shots were still coming out from the front, but the firing had started to die down. Whether it was from running out of ammo or being taken down, I'll never know. Chapter 3. The Collapse. Sounds of moans shadowed the din of combat. They came shambling out of the smoke like some hellish nightmare. The SWAT team opened up. I watched as one of the rioters took over 12 rounds to the center mass and did not go down. One of the SWAT officers I could not see who was going all out on full auto. Oh, the machine gun only fell silent after a bloody scream. A lady in a business suit grabbed one of the officers as he was reloading his rifle. He hit her with the stock of his rifle, took a step back, and let his rifle go. He brought up the Milkor grenade launcher on his back. He fired close to point blank, and the 40mm round punched a hole in her chest. The sternum completely caved in, and a loud snap sound echoed as the round hit her, spin snapping in and coming to a stop. The grenade went off and smoke started to billow out of her chest as she fell on top of the officer. I took off running, and a few other riot officers were running as well. I was trying to suck in as much air as I could, but was failing miserably due to the gas mask. I felt trapped and closed off. I wanted to rip off my mask and suck in the air, but with all the tear gas I knew, I'd be done for. I had to fight down the rising tension in my stomach. Vomiting with a gas mask on is an experience I didn't want to have, but the thought of all those officers firing into a crowd of unarmed civilians made me sick. I reached my old position, rear guard, and yelled, "Lieutenant! Lieutenant!" The other deputies were looking at me like I was a madman. I know the distance was only 4 blocks, but they had to hear all the shooting that took place. Lieutenant O'Connor ran over. "Alex, what the hell is going on? You just had a dozen guys from the front run past saying something like, 'They're not human.' What's with all the shooting?" "I don't know, man. I saw one of the rioters get hit a dozen times. They don't die. You can't kill them. I was told to fall back to the rally point." Lieutenant O'Connor said, "Just stay here. I'm going to see what's happening." He jogged into the dense smoke. The other 5 deputies and myself stood there looking at where the lieutenant had disappeared into the smoke. Pistol shots rang out. Lieutenant O'Connor ran back at us, yelling, "God, fall back to the rally point now." His hand was bleeding, and I could see a ragged wound on his arm. His service pistol was unholstered. All of us took off running. We were only 8 blocks away from the rally point. I figured we could regroup and go in more heavily armed if necessary. As we turned the corner, the scene that awaited us was in utter chaos and disarray. Officers were fighting with people. A paramedic was fighting someone off while a police officer hit him repeatedly with his baton. He hit the person so hard that the baton broke in half. A few of the deputies waded into the maelstrom to help. 2 officers were backed into the wall of the parking ramp while several people slowly shambled towards them. One of the officers had a large can of pepper spray and sprayed everyone in the face. Pepper spray was dripping off them, but no one in the group seemed to care. The other police officer pulled his service weapon and started shooting into the group. One of the rounds missed and actually struck another officer in the shoulder, causing him to fall down. As he fell, 3 of the things jumped on him. The door to the OWI Arrest Processing Center opened up and a bunch of them came walking out, the moans growing louder with each footstep. 2 deputies with beanbag shotguns started shooting into the crowd of them. As they made their way towards us, Lieutenant O'Connor began shooting his pistol at them. I noticed that every time a round struck their head, they'd go down and stay down. I pulled out my pistol but was hesitant to shoot. There were fellow officers and other first responders in the mix. I couldn't bring myself to shoot. Lieutenant O'Connor yelled over the battle raging in front of us. "Ditch the less lethals and head back to the car. We need to get out of there." The remaining deputies and I ran for our cars a few blocks away. There were only 4 of us left. We made it to our cruisers, huffing and puffing, trying to breathe. Everyone ditched their gas masks. The smell of death was in the air along with burning buildings and melting plastics. It was all an assault on the nostrils. One of these things was walking down the street alone. A single headshot put it down. "What's the plan, Elsie? Where do we go?" one of the deputies asked. Lieutenant O'Connor spoke. "I don't know. Get out of the city. If you have family in the city, get them and get out. If you can't get out, head towards the SBPD headquarters building. It should be safe there." The female deputy asked, "You mean get out and head back to the sheriff's department?" "No. These things, or whatever they are, have more than likely taken over the sheriff's department. The jail's attached to that building, and we've been transporting the rioters there. There have been more than a few of them." He pointed at the thing laying in the street. He was wearing a janitor outfit and had black blood covering the front of his body. "I don't know where you guys should go, but get out and be safe. I'm already done for." "That's not true, Lieutenant." "Yeah, it is, Alex. Look." Lieutenant O'Connor showed us the wound on his hand. It looked like someone took a chunk out of it between the thumb and pointer finger. Like a badly infected bite wound. Black lines spiderwebbed from the contact point all the way up his arm. "I bet you any money I have whatever is causing all this. There's no point in trying to get out, for me. All I can do is delay them from spreading out." Lieutenant O'Connor reached into his police SUV and came out with his patrol rifle. The sound of footsteps, hundreds if not thousands, could be heard. A chorus of moans was carried out in the wind. Lieutenant O'Connor shook each of our hands with his healthy hand and wished us all the best. The 3 remaining deputies, myself included, shook hands with each other as well. I was the last to pull away. Didn't know how far this thing was spreading, but I needed to get out of the city somehow. I tried to call Erica, but all I got was, "Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please try again later." The last thing I saw was Lieutenant O'Connor propping his rifle in the crook of his SUV's door, starting to fire as a slow-motion wave of things slowly walked towards him. Didn't even make a dent in their numbers. I drove a short time, trying to get back onto Highway 35 and get out of the city. I go up a block or so and see a crash blocking the road and have to double back and take a different way. It's quiet in my squad car. Well, I was actually thinking, the radio should be going crazy right now. Then it hit me. Radio. I still have it set for Mutual Aid 1, not the Sheriff's Department frequency. I went to change it, but my riot gear was rubbing against the prison cage. I knew I should have taken this off. But on the other hand, it is bite-proof and I might need it. I actually had to turn my torso just to get at the radio control knob. That's when I heard the air horn and looked up to see a flashing red light of an emergency vehicle. It's coming at me from the passenger side. I heard the crunch and felt the impact as my Crown Vic flipped onto its roof and spun like a top. My duty bag went flying and my documents and paperwork scattered everywhere. The hit deployed my airbags and something hit my head really hard. I felt myself starting to black out. The last thing I remember hearing was the AM/FM radio being turned on in 3 tones with the emergency alert system. "This is not a test. The following message is transmitted at the request of the Bear Creek County Sheriff's Department. This is a shelter-in-place warning for all residents of Bear Creek. Lock all of your doors and do not open them for anyone until the all clear is given. This message will repeat." I could tell that I was being dragged. The sound was more intense than the pressure on my back. The sound of my metal riot helmet scraping across the pavement was the first thing that awakened my senses. I could barely make out the voice in the distance. "Easy, Alex. We'll get you to safety." There was one other voice, this one a female. "Open these doors right now, or I'll break the glass, and no one will be safe." I could hear the sound of cheesy background music playing. It was peaceful and relaxing. As someone ran up to me, I could hear gunshots ringing out. Someone was yelling, "In here, it's safe here." My vision was blurry, and I couldn't make out what they were talking about. "Hey, buddy, I'm gonna need these." I heard the unsnapping of buttons and the tug on the front of my belt. I subconsciously reached for my sidearm. Still felt it in my holster. The voice said, "Don't worry, Alex. You'll get to keep that." Another voice from farther away yelled, "Hey, get back out here. They're closing in." I blacked out again. I could faintly hear a female voice yelling, "Help me move him." Felt like I was floating. A bright light filled my vision like a train coming down a tunnel. I opened my eyes and let out a groan. It felt like I'd been on a drinking bender all night. My head was pounding. My vision was finally coming into focus. I could see a man in an EMT uniform shining a flashlight in my eyes. "Welcome back to the land of the living, deputy." What happened?" I croaked. "You got into a car accident and took a pretty big hit to the head. And lucky for you, you still had your riot helmet on." He reached down and lifted my riot helmet to my face. The big dent on the right side was clearly visible. "Yeah, where am I?" I asked as I tried to stand on shaky legs. "Well, deputy, you're on the 5th floor of the luxurious Sunburst Downtown Hotel and Conference Center." The room was large with big glass windows. The windows overlooked downtown. A small coffee shop with a sign that proudly stated, "Serving the city's best coffee," was displayed. Comfortable chairs and couches attuned the area. A handful of people were in the room. Most of them were wearing worried expressions while on their cell phones trying to make calls. Hey, I'm Peter, by the way. Alex, I said, shaking his hand. Yeah, you would have called me a few hours ago when that jogger got attacked. Hey, how is he? Well, he's probably dead, Peter answered. A voice called out from over by the windows. Hey, what up, brother? I turned to see who it was and was overjoyed when I realized it was Tenny, former Bear Creek County Sheriff Deputy who left the department a few years ago to work for the city of Sunburst Police. Tenny walked up to me. I noticed he wasn't in uniform, just a black leather jacket and blue jeans. He had a pistol in an off-duty holster on his left side. We embraced and performed our handshake, slapping our hands together. It was kind of hard for me to translate, but the meaning behind the shake was clear. We're safe now. We always did handshakes after any major incident or adrenaline-producing event. So, zombies, who knew? Tenny said. I looked at him confused. Zombies? It can't be that. Zombies are not real. They can't be. This is not some Joe McKinney novel or some George A. Romero movie. This is real life. The dead don't just walk around. Tenny walked me over to the big windows and pointed down. On the streets below, dozens of bodies lay face down on top of a moving cop car. My cop car was upside down and on fire. Back half of an ambulance was sticking out of a clothing store. A group of 6 were on their knees gathered around something laying on the ground. 2 people ran down the street, followed by a group of 30 who were slowly following after them, arms outstretched. I could hear the collective moans, which caused others to get up and follow. My head was spinning. Whether that was from the car accident or the newfound information that they were in fact zombies, well, couldn't be sure. I flopped myself down in one of the chairs. A woman brought me a glass of water in a cheap styrofoam cup and sat down across from me. She was African American and short, about 5'5" if I were to guess. She wore a business-looking suit that was stained with dry blood. She had a badge on the front of her belt and a pistol on her right hip. Her leg had a bandage on it, and she walked with a subtle limp. Tenny sat on the arm of the chair next to her. Alex, this is Talon, detective with Sunburst PD. It's really nice to meet you. Thanks for the water, I said as we shook hands. Peter came over and sat down next to us as well. Tenny reached into his jacket pocket and handed me an empty magazine from a pistol and said, Well, before I forget, you can have these back. Sorry, but we had to use them when you were unconscious at the time. I took them and did a quick check of the belt. Everything was still there, minus the magazine. I pressed the magazine release button on my service pistol, saw that it still had a full mag in it. Well, that's one bright spot, thought to myself. Pulled my radio off my belt and set it on the small coffee table in front of us. Yeah. Does anyone else have a radio? I asked. Well, I didn't have time to grab one, Tenny replied. Peter pointed to the bright green shoulder mic on his radio and said, Batteries are dead on mine. I looked at Talon. I had to use mine to escape, she said. Took a deep breath and said, Okay, mine's on Mutual Aid 1. I was at the downtown riots. A bunch of us were. I explained what had happened, and when I was finished, they all had a look of shock on their faces. Since we were safe at the moment, we all agreed that we were only going to listen in and try to get a story of what was going on out in the city. I switched over to the SBPD frequency. I don't think anyone was ready for what we heard, with chaotic emergency alert tones going off non-stop. Need backup at the intersection of Jackson and Division. I got hundreds of them. I need... Officer down. Officer down. Just south. This is SWAT Team 2. St. Mary's is lost. I repeat, the hospital is lost. We do not have the force profile to hold the... Hello. Someone help me. I found this radio on a dead police officer. I'm hiding in a closet, but They know I'm here. Please send it. Rapid-fire gunshots followed by screams and moaning could be heard.
This is Trooper 377. I got a mix of about 24 officers and private civilians with firearms trying to hold them back on Cook Bridge. We need more units out here.
An explosion drowned out the transmission, followed by,
Jesus H. They're bombing the bridge. All units get off the bridge.
the transmission cut out. Seconds later, we all heard several distant booms. One of the people that was up here with us yelled, "Look!" Everyone looked out the window to see 3 fireballs blossom from the direction of the bridge. A man wearing a black polo shirt with the word security on it said,
"Up here. We can see better from the roof."
Tenny and I ran to the stairwell, and a few others followed. I looked back and saw Talon and Peter staying behind. We burst onto the roof just as the last of the fireballs was burning out. Thick black smoke poured out from where the explosions had come from. 2 fighter jets came screaming past with the glow of their afterburners visible in the setting sunlight. 2 sharp booms echoed out.
"What the hell was that?"
the security guard asked. Someone replied, "Sonic boom. They're not supposed to get that fast over the United States. Jeez, last time they did that was 9/11. The jets banked hard and started flying back towards us. Some of the people started waving their hands and jumping up and down, trying to get the pilot's attention. Something dropped from under one of the fighter jet's wings, followed by a plume of white smoke which formed behind the object. A few seconds later, the cell phone tower that was erected on the building a few blocks over exploded. Then another tower exploded, followed by a third and a fourth tower. All around the city, they went up in a ball of fire. Tenny yelled,
"Everyone, off the roof right now."
Everyone ran back down the stairs as more fireballs sprang up on the various TV, radio, and cell phone towers across the city. As we all made it back to the 5th floor, Talon walked over with my radio still in her hand. "So, what happened up there, boys?" she asked.
Looks like the Air Force is blowing up all communication towers," I replied. "Whatever's going on, they don't want us getting a message about it to the outside."
"Well, that explains why your radio went silent. They blew up all the radio repeaters. You'd be lucky to get more than 2 blocks with this thing," Talon explained. As she tossed the police radio back to me, I noticed that she looked a touch paler than she had before. The hard lines on her face, which showed years of street-hardened experience, slowly faded as she plopped herself back down onto one of the oversized chairs. Peter rushed over to her and began to check her vitals. He looked up at us. "Well, it's not a bite," he said immediately. "She got a bad cut when we hit your squad car. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt in the back of the ambulance and went flying into the bulkhead. I think she's nicked an artery. Got the bleeding slowed without using a tourniquet, but she lost a good amount of blood. The fact she's still conscious, let alone walking, is a miracle."
"Well, now that we don't have communications with the outside world, let's try to get a big picture of what's going on,"
I said. I began to share my events, starting with the TAC alert and ending with the crash. When I was finished, Talon began to retell her experience. Chapter 4. Detective Talon. The phone rang on my office desk. "Hello, Detective Talon?" The words made the corners of my lips curve up in a subconscious smile.
"Detective, this is Captain Matt.
Got a call from one of the patrol officers. Possibly a 187 at the South Side apartment. They got 3 bodies. CSI is already there photographing the scene. Get your partner and get over there ASAP." "Yes, sir," I said, while trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. I know it might sound bad to be excited about dead bodies. This was my first case. I was assigned after getting promoted to detective and going through all the classes and training. I sprang out of my seat. Still felt weird going from a full duty belt with every police tool under the sun to do my job to just a pistol, a spare mag, and one set of handcuffs. Trying to suppress my excitement, I calmly walked over to my partner's desk. My heart was racing 1,000,000 miles an hour. Detective Evan was my partner. He was out of shape. His 15 years behind a desk as a detective was obvious around his midsection. "Hey, Evan," I said. "We got one." Evan looked around the computer monitor at his desk and asked, "Well, what do we got?" Possible 187 homicide at the Southside Apartments with 3 victims. With a deep breath and a squeak of his office chair, he stood, tossing the keys to me, saying, "I'll bring the car around in front if you're driving." I pulled the unmarked maroon Crown Victoria to the front and Evan got in. We just pulled onto the street when the police radio in the car came to life.
5280, 5290, respond to 618 Chatterton. 618 Chatterton for a group of 5 fighting.
We headed to the south side of the city when 2 marked police cars drove past us in the opposite direction with their lights and sirens activated. Well, I thought to myself, go get 'em, boys. We crossed the railroad tracks to the city's south side. Evan let out a grunt of disdain and said, "What a dumpster fire." "What do you mean by that?" I asked. "The south side's all ghetto. This is the 5th murder this month. You know how many drive-bys and how much gang shit happens over here? Yeah, not to mention the home invasions." "Yeah, this was my beat for 5 years. I know the area. Yeah, there are some neighborhoods that are bad. There's no denying that, but a lot of these people work hard. This is where poverty meets pride. An overwhelming majority of the people keep their yards clean and their houses looking spick and span. Don't let a few bad apples ruin it for everyone. With both parents working and kids off to school, criminals know no one will be home, so it's easy pickings. That's why most of the people here have bars over the windows, to deter the would-be home invaders." We got to the apartment complex. A police car with its emergency lights on was on the side of the road, and traffic cones blocked the roadway. I flashed our emergency lights hidden in the grille and visor, and the cop moved the traffic cones for us. We pulled up and put the car in park just as the police radio started back up. "Dispatch, this is 5290. Myself and 5280 have 5 individuals at gunpoint. Send backup." Dispatcher replied with,
10-4, 5270, 5260, 5250. Respond. 1033 to 618 Chatterton. 618 Chatterton to back up 5280 and 90. All other officers stay off the air until I hear back from 5280.
I heard police sirens from different parts of the city as the officers were on their way to help another officer. We walked under the crime scene tape, which was super cool to do and makes you feel like you're important. I saw 2 ambulances with their back doors open and 2 gurneys with white sheets over them. The driver of one of the ambulances was chowing down on a sandwich. I recognized him from my time as a beat cop. A lot of the first responders get to know each other from all the different calls they go on. They normally end up becoming good friends. I walked up to the ambulance just as Peter beat down on his lunch. I held up my badge and said, "License and registration." Peter let out a laugh, which caused crumbs to fly out of his mouth and land all over the steering wheel. Peter then rolled down the window after swallowing his food. "Hey, Talon, how are you? It's been a while since I've seen you. I thought you switched patrol areas on me." No, nothing like that. But I did make detective. That's why I've been off the road for a few months. Haven't been to our book club meeting. Well, I've been studying," I replied. "That's awesome. Congratulations. I'm guessing that's why you're here?" "Yeah, it's the first case they've assigned me. If you want to give me your take on it, my ears are open. I know you're a big mystery fan of those Who Did It books." "Yeah, sure can. When I arrived on the scene, we had 3 victims. Older male, older female, and a younger male. My best guess was a murder-suicide. Shot his wife and kid, then ate the licorice himself. Did 5 minutes of chest compression on the female and younger male, as they were pulseless, not breathing. We were unable to revive them. 2 gunshot wounds were located on both victims with no shell casing around. I'm guessing it was a revolver, maybe a .357. Definitely hollow points, as there were no exit wounds on the backside. Now I'm just waiting for them to load them up on the rig and take them to Mercy Medical for the examination. It's a very good deduction you have, I said. We'll, however, need an official statement from you and the other paramedics on scene that worked on the bodies. Also, hold up a second on loading them up. I'd like to take a look at them quickly. As my partner and I walked back to the ambulance, Evan said to me, "Good deduction on his part, but don't let his side of the story sway the way you gather information. I get he's your boyfriend and all, but I recommend seeing the crime scene first before you start questioning people." First off, he's not my boyfriend. And second, I know that. I just like to get insight on things. We got to the gurney and lifted up the sheet covering the victim. The female part of her shirt was cut away and 2 bullet wounds were visible in her chest. I had one of the EMTs help me roll her on the side, and just like Peter said, there were no exit wounds. I removed my examining gloves and said to Evan, "Possible hollow point rounds. It could be smaller FMJ round that struck the ribs and didn't go all the way through." I turned to the EMT. "Have the doctor email me the findings when he's done." And I handed him my business card. Just then, the sheet moved. I jumped back as the EMT and Evan let out a laugh. "These fresh corpses. You never ever seen a death twitch before, detective?" the EMT asked with a chuckle. I shrugged off the response, and Evan and I turned towards the apartment. A very young-looking officer was guarding the crime scene. The officer took our names and badge numbers and signed us in. Put on our hairnets, face masks, gloves, and shoe booties to avoid tracking any unwanted DNA to the crime scene. The CSI, crime scene investigators, were hard at work photographing everything. Small plastic number tents were strewn about the area. I talked to one of the CSI techs. He gave me a list and a brief description of what evidence was removed and what was still needed processing. I walked around paying particular attention to the blood splatter on the ceiling and walls. I saw a couch not too far from where the suspect had eaten his own gun. I asked the CSI techs if we could lift the couch up. They didn't see why not, since they'd already processed that room. Evan grabbed one side, and the other CSI tech grabbed the other, and they lifted. "Ah, there it is," I said. The CSI tech, not lifting the couch, looked over and said, "Yep," and began snapping away with his camera. After a few minutes, Evan let out a strained, "You two almost done? God, this pig is heavy." The CSI tech nodded at me. Using sterile metal tweezers, I grabbed the pistol and removed it from under the couch. Evan and the tech set it down with a thump. I examined it closely. It was a .357 revolver. Evan grabbed an evidence bag and I popped open the revolver cylinder and saw that all but one round had been fired. I dropped the rounds into the evidence bag, making the weapon safe for the CSI techs to handle. A voice called out from the front door. "Detectives, could you come here quick?" Evan looked at me and asked, "Did you see what kind of bullets they were before you sealed the evidence bag?" I took a second to think and realized I hadn't. "No, I didn't," I replied sheepishly. The voice called again. "Detectives?" Evan said, "Talon, these are the small details you need to remember to check. Now this is clearly an open and shut case, but remember to slow down and check. I'm glad you found the suspected murder weapon." Evan was cut off when the voice, almost in a panic, called out, "Detective, something's going on out here." Evan let out a sigh. "Probably the victim's family members. I'll go see what the deal is." A moment later, Evan called out to me. "Well, Talon, your boyfriend got one thing wrong. They're not dead." I stopped what I was doing and yelled back, "He's not my boyfriend. Yes, they are. I examined them myself." "Well, come out here and look." "Why?" I replied. Well, I don't know what's going on. Can't be possible. What's not possible? I asked while making my way over to the window to look outside. They're moving on the frickin' gurney. Who is? Evan's voice went up an octave. The fucking dead people. They're getting up. I looked outside to see the younger male starting to move. Female EMT was beginning to check for a heartbeat with the stethoscope when he sat up and bit the EMT on the arm. She let out a scream, and I saw skin and flesh get pulled away from her arm. A very large EMT, built like a lumberjack, rushed in and punched the teenager who just bit his co-worker in the face, sending him rolling off the gurney and onto the ground. The female EMT was spraying blood everywhere. Oh, the bite must have gotten the radial artery. The other EMT on scene rushed in to stop the bleeding. They put her in the back of the second ambulance and raced off. The female started to move as well. She got off the gurney and started walking toward the young officer guarding the crime scene. Evan was standing in the doorway behind him. The young officer fumbled around his belt line until he found his taser. In a shaky voice that cracked when he spoke, he said, "Don't come any closer, or you'll be tased." She was scrambling forward, getting closer and closer with each step. Evan yelled, "He's just tased her already. She's crazy." The officer pulled the trigger on his taser. The probe shot out with a pop and made contact with her flesh. The woman faltered for a second and kept walking forward with her arms extended towards the young officer. And Evan yelled, "Zap her again." The taser gives a 5-second zap. The back of it even has a countdown timer so the officer knows when it's safe to arrest the person or give them another zap if they're not complying to the officer's orders. I saw the timer count down from 5 to 0. That woman never stopped walking. The young officer looked back at Evan, eyes wide and scared. "What do I do now, sir?" "If you got pepper spray, now'd be the time to use it, son." The officer dropped the taser on the ground and found his can of OC pepper spray. A 1-second burst is all you need, but in his panic he emptied the whole can into her face. It did nothing to discourage the woman from coming forward. The officer, who never moved from his spot, let out a scream as the victim of a shooting no more than 30 minutes ago bit into the officer's neck. Evan pulled his pistol out and shot the woman point blank in the face, causing her to fall down and stay down. The officer was choking on his own blood. One of the EMTs ran up to help as the teen got up from the ground and made his way toward Evan. Evan turned and fired 3 rounds into the teenager. Watched the new holes form, right next to where the previous gunshots were. A fury of shots rang out as the officer, who was at the roadblock, ran up and emptied his pistol into the teen. Bullets ripped into his body, and he went down. The EMT working on the younger officer jumped back in alarm as the officer grabbed onto Evan's leg and bit down hard. Evan fell to the ground. I ran out with my pistol in my right hand, but before I could even raise it, Evan fired 1 round off, hitting the officer in the head. Blood began to pour out of the leg bites. Luckily, the other EMT and Peter jumped into action as the officer from the roadblock reloaded and moved forward, talking into his radio. They put a tourniquet onto Evan's leg and cinched it down tight. Evan let out a groan of pain. We put him in the back of the ambulance and sped off towards Mercy Medical Center. The last thing I saw out of the ambulance's back windows was the teenager getting back up and walking towards the officer. The 2 CSI techs ran out of the building. Chapter 5. The Hospital. I got on my portable police radio. "This is Detective Talon. 1033, officer down. We need a police escort to Mercy Medical. We're on the south side of 9th Street, just north of the railroad track. Break. Send additional units to the south side apartment. An EMT from SBFD and an officer from SBPD have been attacked. Shots have been fired. Dispatch sounded frantic. It was like everything in the dispatch center decided to go tits up all at once. Message received. No units available at this time. They're downtown dealing with a riot. On other urgent calls or just not answering their radios. Hey, good luck. I looked at my radio in complete shock and yelled out loud. No units available? How the hell are there no units available? Shit, I'd take a meter maid blocking traffic to help up at this point. The ambulance, with its lights flashing and siren blaring, raced down the empty streets. Peter, I yelled, how much longer do we have? Oh, we're 3 minutes out. I'll let them know we have an officer down and we're coming in hot, but no one's answering me at the hospital. Every now and then a cop car or fire truck would zoom past and an occasional gunshot could be heard. Peter's partner was calling vitals over the radio. Evan lost consciousness at some point. Blood sloshed back and forth with every turn we took. We heard the sounds of helicopter blades overhead as the Flight for Life helicopter ambulance was coming in to land on the roof. This brought forth a surge of hope for me. Hey, they're going to helicopter him to a different hospital, I thought. The parking lot was full of cars and people rushing other people into the front entrance of the building. We raced into the ambulance bay to see the other ambulances from the crime scene already here. The garage door closed automatically behind us. Peter, the other EMT, and I all jumped out, expecting to see a team of doctors to whisk Evan up to the waiting chopper. Instead, we were greeted with screams. The other ambulance's back doors were open and a bloody handprint was on the inside of the glass. Blood dripped down the back of the rig and went down the small drain built into the floor of the garage. The other EMT agreed to stay with Evan and continue checking his vitals until we could get someone here to help. It'd be too risky to move him until we knew for sure we could get help. Peter and I took off down the hallway and past some dark offices. We ran into the ER room, which was an absolute charnel house. The nurse in scrubs was lying face up as two doctors scooped up her guts into their mouths. A security guard was being torn apart by one nurse and 3 patients in hospital gowns. One of them still had an IV in their arm. Looked like someone had taken a can of red paint, put it in a mixer with no lid and fully sent it. God, a janitor was gnawing on someone's arm. Banging on metal doors could be heard. The doors had quarantine signs that were obviously quickly slapped on at some point. There had to be around 30 of these horrible things in this room. I whispered to Peter, "We need to get out of here before they notice us." Peter nodded his head, indicating a yes. We started to tiptoe our way back to the double doors that would lead us down the hallway and back to the ambulance. Before we opened the door, we saw a dozen of these things come out from the room. It was a surgical team in scrubs and masks. There were black stains on their masks and all over their scrubs. Thinking quickly, I took a crash cart, a medical cart with a defibrillator, medical supplies, and basically everything else you'd need to bring someone back from the dead. I moved it quietly in front of the door, blocking it. This was also blocking our only way back to the ambulance, though. "Peter," I whispered, "you know this place better than I do. How do we get out of here?" "Well, I have an idea. I'll need your radio." I gave him my radio. With a few presses of the buttons and one turn of the knob, he had it all set. He then told me the plan. "We'll take the elevators that are over to the left." He pointed to the 3 elevator doors. "I'm going to use your radio and throw it down the hallway." I changed the frequency to one of those non-used channels. I'll press the orange button on top of my radio, which should activate the emergency tone on your radio. When all these sick people go over there, we'll take the elevator door and go out through the basement. "Peter, you're a genius, you know that?" He then threw the radio down the hallway and it bounced off a wall and into a room. Peter pressed the orange button on top of his radio and the emergency tone began to go off. The creatures got up and started shuffling towards the sound. We made our way over to the elevators and pressed the button. The soft ding sounded like two cymbals crashing together. It caused two of the monsters to turn towards us. I pulled my pistol as the door chimed open and we backed in. Oh, they were getting closer. Peter kept hitting the closed door button. You know, it doesn't matter how many times you press that button, right? It won't close any faster, I said. Right as the doors were closing, a hand got stuck between them, which caused the doors to reopen. I put my pistol to the thing's head and shot it. I followed that with a shot at the one behind it. The door closed and reopened again. The body was blocking the door, so I jumped out of the elevator and moved the body quickly. But the gunshot got everyone's attention. I started shooting and was able to drop a few more with some headshots before they could get to the elevator doors. The doors finally closed. We both let out a sigh of relief. Peter took his ID badge out and put it next to the scanner, which allowed us to take the elevator down to the basement. As the doors opened, I had my gun up and ready. The hallway was white and clean with the smell of disinfectant in the air. The sign said morgue. I looked at him with an expression that read, "You can't be serious." I checked and cleared the offices as we made our way down the hallway. I didn't want any surprises coming from behind me. As we checked the last office, we saw a doctor with a bite mark on his arm. He was sitting in his chair and a small pistol was on the floor. The side of his head was blown clean out. I cleared the office and noticed a small tape player on his desk. I clicked play and listened to the voice of the dead man speak. "Circulatory, respiratory, and other vital functions have terminated. These subjects are all, well, by all medical definitions, deceased. The infection is spread through direct fluid contact. It must enter the bloodstream through an open wound. Infection duration depends on the size of the wound and its proximity to a major blood vessel. Reanimation will occur no later than 1 to 32 minutes after the victim's primary life functions have stopped. Once reanimation has occurred, the person will respond with immediate homicidal aggression. This has proven to happen 100% of the time." I gasped, and Peter said, "It's a hoax. It's gotta be a hoax. Dead people just don't get up and walk around." I looked at him and said, I think we're dealing with zombies." As we pushed into the door that said exam room, we saw that there were several autopsy tables. All but one of them was empty. On the occupied table, the subject began to move. He flopped onto the floor and stood up. All of his vital internal organs fell to the floor. "Okay, Peter, explain that. He has no organs in his body now, and his large intestines are dragging behind him. He's just a hollow shell." I fired one round into where his heart used to be and yelled, "Come on, Peter. Tell me how this is not real. He's dead, or he's got to be." I fired another round into his neck. "But how is he moving then?" Peter yelled. "As a medical man, I have no explanation. Gosh, just kill it already." I shot it in the head, and the man dropped to the floor. "Oh man, shit, Talon. They are zombies." Peter gasped out as he started hyperventilating and pacing back and forth. "Man, oh no. We gotta get out of here, like now." "Okay, Peter, calm down. Now you said there was a way out through the basement. How do we get out?" I asked. "There's a loading door that leads to the parking lot. We use it to have the hearse pick up the body on the back side of the hospital. We'll have to run through the parking lot." We made our way through the last room where they store all the cold bodies. Hearing the banging from inside their individual lockers gave me the chills. We opened the door and ran up the ramp into a world of chaos. Screams and gunshots rang out. It was like being in a war zone. The air raid sirens were going off like crazy. I stopped Peter for a second and said, "Why don't you radio your partner to have him drive the ambulance over to get us? Then we can head to St. Mary's across town to get Evan some help, or just drive out of the city." "Radio's dead," Peter said as he clicked the push to talk button twice, which resulted in no sound. Crap. Well, so much for that idea. Right, let's get this over with. We started jogging around the side of the hospital, staying close to the wall. I saw a man holding a baby carrier in one hand, running toward a car with 4 zombies after him. My police instincts took over. I ran out and darted out into the parking lot. They were on him fast. I stopped, raised my pistol, and shot all 4, saving the man's life. He hopped into his car and took off, with not even so much as a thank you. I turned to jog back when something grabbed my foot and bit down. A zombie had pulled itself from under a car and got me. I panicked and shot it. The slide locked back on my service weapon. I reloaded and had a second to breathe. Peter came running over. "Did it bite you?" he asked. "Yeah, but only on my composite toe boot." I then kicked the twice dead person in the head. I made a mad dash to the ambulance garage. We were running at a good clip when the sound of a jet engine started to spool up and the whooshing of helicopter blades became louder. We both looked up in time to see the air ambulance lift off. I turned to Peter. "God, I'd love to be in there, above all this, safe and..." Before I could finish, the helicopter took off and shot out to the left, and then right back at the building. There were 3 people hanging onto the skids of the chopper. The chopper was clawing for altitude and the engine was screaming. The rotor blades were trying to beat the air into submission with each rotation. Then a lone, shambling figure stumbled next to the helicopter, which was almost level with the rooftop. We both watched as the zombie got sucked into the air intake and shot out the backside in a mess of gunk. The helicopter flamed out as the engine was starved of air and free fell to the ground below and exploded. Right at the entrance of the hospital, we stared for a moment as the zombies came out on fire, shambling around. Peter and I then sprinted to the ambulance garage, and Peter used his ID badge to unlock the door. We shut the door and saw Evan tearing chunks out of Peter's EMT partner. I said a short prayer, raised my pistol, and shot Evan in the back of the head. Then I shot Peter's partner as well, to be safe. I took Evan's gun, badge, and spare magazine. Peter started the ambulance, and I hopped in the back. As we made our way out of the city, we drove with the emergency lights on. It didn't matter that anyone who was on the road didn't care. We were coming up to an intersection. I was leaning into the front of the ambulance, telling Peter where to go when he suddenly locked up the brakes and we hit something hard. I was flung forward, my leg hitting the edge of the bulkhead. I remember feeling a deep, sharp pain and then nothing. I woke up to Peter yelling, "Down, we need to move fast." I could also hear gunshots. I opened up the door to see someone dragging a sheriff deputy out of his cruiser. He got him halfway out and turned around to shoot 3 zombies in the face. He proceeded to drag him out and drag him over to a nearby hotel. I ran over to help. Peter grabbed his medical bag, slung it over his shoulder, and followed. The man was arguing with someone on the other side of the hotel's glass door. After everything I'd seen today, I was done dealing with people. I walked up and pointed my pistol at the glass and said, "Open these doors right now, or I'll break the glass, and then no one's safe." The pimply-faced kid was wearing a black shirt that said security. His eyes went wide as he stared down the barrel of my pistol. He locked the door and Peter helped the other guy carry the deputy inside. The man came back out and showed me his police badge. "I'm Tanny," he said. I showed him mine and replied, "Detective Talon, Homicide Unit." I realized that the title had somewhat lost its meaning now that the dead were walking. Zombies started shambling towards us. Officer Tenney raced back to the upside-down squad car and came out with a deputy's patrol rifle and started blasting the walking dead back. A couple of survivors ran up and into the hotel. Tenney was walking back when the rifle went dry. He discarded the empty rifle and pulled his pistol back out and kept shooting until he ran out of ammo. But more continued to come. He ran back to the sheriff's deputy and pulled the pistol mags off his belt. He then ran back out shooting, thinning the horde that slowly made their way towards us. When he was down to his last mag, he ran back in and told the security guard to lock the doors. Peter and Tenny carried the deputy to the elevators, and we all rode up to the 5th floor. So there we go. Stories starting to be seen from the other people's perspective, all bring us up to that one point that we are at now. If anything I just said makes sense, then woo, thank God. But yeah, this is really hotting up. Like I said, this is going to take me most of the summer to get through because it's an epic. Probably just about a quarter of the way through the story at this point. I'm expecting it to be 5-6 hours in length in total when we get to the end, and it will definitely be worth it. Okay, thanks for listening on this beautiful Sunday. See you again real soon, probably tomorrow night. Till then, my dear friends, very, very sweet dreams. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.